I'm John Green, and this is my last meal.
Every person has exactly two things in common. We all gotta eat and we're all gonna die. Today's guest is a #1 New York Times best-selling author, co-founder of the YouTube series Crash Course, a consensus top 2 Green brother, and the best damn boxing book reviewer that Booklist magazine has ever seen. John Green, welcome to the show.
Wow, we're gonna go deep.
We are going deep. When did you find your passion for pugilistic prose, John?
Well, I didn't actually have a passion. What happened was the editor of Booklist magazine came into my office one day and said, hey kid, you know George? And I said, of course I know George. And he said, yeah, I got terrible news. George died. And I was like, what? And he was like, yeah, no, George passed away. So listen, kid, George was on boxing and Holocaust. I got Eileen on Holocaust, but I'm going to need you on boxing.
Did you ever say, hey, I'm not really a fan of boxing, I'd rather take Holocaust?
No. Boxing seemed easier on every level.
Yeah. Do you remember the first boxing book review you wrote?
It's called This Bloody Mary is the Last Thing I Own.
Incredible.
And it's about a guy who's a writer who also becomes a boxing trainer and sort of a manager for this young boxer. And at one point, he's in a bar somewhere, and this other old boxing guy is like, "This Bloody Mary is the last thing I own," which it's such a great line.
Absolutely beautiful. There was one you wrote for a book called Perfect in Their Art, Poems About Boxing from Homer to Ali.
Yeah.
You seemed very tickled by Muhammad Ali saying, quote, there's going to be a total eclipse of the Sunny before he fought Sonny Liston.
Yes, that's very good. There's another poem in that book that I still remember where it's called The Boxer's Embrace, and the poet says, let me get it right. Give me a second here. This is the truth of all destructive action, transcending histories of consequence and serving therefore as a modeled lens unto the bifurcated human heart whose one true nature is to break apart. It's pretty good.
That's the show. Let's wrap it up. We'll give you your food to go. That's incredible. Have you thought about your last meal before?
I thought about it a little bit when my brother did this show, but then I thought, gosh, I wonder if I could ever do it. Then I figured you wouldn't have both Green brothers on, but you are, which I appreciate.
In fact, we had to have both Green brothers. We had to collect the entire family.
You have to get the set.
Absolutely.
I'm very excited to have my last meal. I spent a lot of time thinking about it because I think what I wanted was stuff that evoked different parts of my life, that reminded me of kind of different phases of what it was like to be here for a little while.
Yeah.
And so that's what I've gone with.
I would ask you how often you think about dying, but I know you think about it quite a lot. I suppose.
Yeah.
How many times have you thought about it this morning?
Oh, quite a bit. Well, partly because I'm doing the show, but also partly because that's sort of my way through the world.
Yeah.
It's weird to me that other people don't think about it, right? Like one time I texted my brother, I was in an airport in Indianapolis on my way to Milwaukee, and I was thinking about how in a handful of decades, all the people in this airport will be gone and replaced by a completely different set of people. And I texted my brother, when you're in an airport, do you ever think about the fact that everyone who's there will soon be dead? And he wrote back, no. So I guess it's just me.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some beauty in that, maybe a little sense of urgency that this is all temporary.
Yeah, that Hamilton line, why do you write like you're running out of time? I think like we are running out of time. And that's just the nature of being here, is that we only get to be here once and only for a little bit. And so I want to try to take advantage of it if I can. But it's nice to be reminded that I also spent a lot of time thinking about boxing 20 years ago.
Something that maybe wasn't even consequential to you in your life now, but at the time I'm sure it was.
Well, it is actually consequential to my life because I met my wife partly because of boxing. My wife was a boxer, and her sparring partner was a girl I was dating. And they were talking, and it turned out that my wife was like, oh, I went to high school with your boyfriend. And so the three of us went out to breakfast, and then my girlfriend moved out of the country about a week later, and so we broke up. And 6 months after that, Sarah and I reconnected, and part of the way we reconnected was that I was able to kind of speak her boxing language, even though I've never been in a ring, God knows. But I knew the lingo, you know?
I thought this was going to end in them having to fight over
No,
you.
certainly not.
That's the greatest story never told.
Certainly not. If anything, I think they were both reluctant to date me.
Whoever wins this fight doesn't have to date John. John, for the first course of your final meal, we have the green beans cooked in pork bacon. We rendered down the bacon, cooked the green beans nice and long in there, and then we have the green chili chicken enchiladas, a little homemade sauce made with tomatillos, roasted Anaheim chilies, poblanos blended up, corn tortillas, plenty of shredded chicken in there, just a little bit of cheese and crema on top. Then, of course, we have Diet Dr. Pepper, the greatest soda ever created. And I believe you have brought your own hot sauce.
I have. I brought my mom and I make hot sauce every year.
It's beautiful.
But I had to put it in a different container so that it would be TSA friendly. So that's what I did. But we make this hot sauce every year. This year, I think there was a little bit too much vinegar, but it's still really good. So I'm just going to pour some of that on if that's all right.
Oh, please, do it up. This is your last meal. I'm merely following along. Is there a year that you think you made the best hot sauce?
Yes.
Sticks out?
2021, we made some absolutely stunning hot sauce. It was so hot. And now in her old age, my mom has gotten a little afraid. I'm sorry if you're watching this, Mom. My mom's gotten a little afraid of real spice, hardcore spice. But it's still really good. I'm so excited for these enchiladas.
I am so excited too. I think enchiladas are kind of a perfect breakfast food.
Well, it is early here.
Tell me the story about the enchiladas, or we can eat in complete silence. That's also an option that people almost never invoke.
This goes back to when my wife and I first started dating. This was one of the first things that we made together, and it's from a family recipe of hers from her grandmother Alice. Hot damn.
Hot damn indeed.
So Sarah and I would make these enchiladas. We still make them, but we made them early on in our relationship, and so it reminds me of those first days of falling in love. You know, when you're first falling in love, everything is like saturated, and all the color. It's like the light, the last hour of the day, that magic hour light, where everything is sort of saturated and sharpened, and all your experiences are woven through this experience of being in love. That's what these enchiladas taste like to me.
Do you ever get this profound sense of sadness and loss that you can never recreate the feelings you had in those moments?
Absolutely. I mean, that's part of what I love about eating and eating in community is you're creating memories, but you're also evoking memories.
Yeah.
That said, one of the magical things about being in a 20-year marriage, and I don't know what it's like to be in a 50-year marriage. I assume it's even more interesting. But like one of the cool things, I kind of thought, did you think of adulthood as like a single thing? Like you arrive at adulthood and then you're an adult for the rest of your life, and it's like you get off the train and then you're just in adulthood, and you just sort of sit in that train station of adulthood until death finally, the sweet embrace of death finally takes you.
Yes, and I had a very specific vision of what that was. This is really sad. When I was like 13 years old, I imagined what it would like to be an adult, and I imagined being 33, and I imagined being outside of a drab apartment building, picking up my child from my divorced wife, like for visitation, and I was like, that's adulthood forever, and that's fine.
I thought of adulthood almost like a zombie virus that I had to try to outrun for as long as possible and like stay like outside of the misery of adulthood, and then eventually the zombies would overtake me and I would die, but like not until I lived as much as I could, and like. Turns out that adulthood is super interesting, and that you continue to change, and that the relationships that you have deepen. And so one of the things that eating this reminds me of is not just that like Sarah and I fell in love, but that Sarah and I kind of keep falling in love. Yeah. That, it's almost like a cycle where you fall in love again, and you're reminded of those good times, but then you get to have more good times, and they're deeper in some ways because when you first get married or when you first are dating someone, you can't know what it's like to love them for 20 years because you haven't. And it's quite magical.
Can I dish you up some green beans?
Yeah, please.
Is there a specific story behind the green beans?
Oh, yeah. The green beans, this is something my mom made when I was a kid. So Sarah likes to cook them, for like 3 minutes, real fast, just to the point where they're a little bendy.
Yep.
But you still have a lot of snap. I don't want any snap.
It's so funny. We were literally debating how to cook these. And when you said cooked with pork bacon, I was like, that is such an old-timey way to phrase it that I bet these are the kinds of green beans that are cooked to mush. And that's the best way to cook green beans.
This is the way my mom made them. That's the way my grandma made them.
You've written in the Anthropocene Reviewed that your subconscious cries out for a sacrifice. And so you reach for a Diet Dr. Pepper. That is one of the hardest things that's ever been written about diet soda. If not I'm willing to crown it as the hardest thing ever written about a diet soda. Yet you only gave it 4 stars.
It's a really good soda, but like I don't labor under the delusion that it's great for me.
Oh, sure, that's
especially with the amount I drink. I really love Diet Dr. Pepper. I don't mind cracking one open right now, actually.
Just the sound. You can
Cheers.
hear that it's Diet Dr. Pepper.
You can. Well, I just did a thing for Sporked, shout out Sporked, where, see, I know, I'm a YouTuber. I know how to do this stuff.
He gets it.
Where we taste tested a bunch of different flavors and versions of Dr. Pepper, and the only one I was totally confident in was Diet Dr. Pepper, because I know this taste.
One of the things that always kind of gets me out of these doom spirals is thinking about the small miracles that we get to partake in every day.
Yeah.
And Dr. Pepper is indeed that. And Diet Dr. Pepper specifically, if the scientist creating an anti-ulcer drug never licked his fingers with the chemical on it, we never would have developed aspartame because he wouldn't have realized it was sweet. Do you have small miracles that you look at that sort of brighten your day and get you to realize that humans are awesome?
I like being in the shade of a tree very much, both because of not being so warm, but also because I'm reminded that there's something much bigger than me, like literally something over me. I look up and I feel the immensity of the tree, and then I also see all the little weird polygons that the interlocking branches make, and how they kind of split up the sky into all these weird polygons, and I find that really just astonishing and wonderful, that like the branches make shapes out of the sky that only I can see in this moment from only this particular angle, and like just being reminded of that makes me happy and makes me feel a little bit like I'm not doom scrolling. It's the opposite of doom scrolling.
Tree hoping.
Tree hoping.
Stop doom scrolling, start tree hoping. You have a legion of people just out staring at trees.
Yeah. My friend Amy Cross Rosenthal, who died of cancer a few years ago, wrote about that beautifully. She said, like, we only have a certain number of times left to stare at a tree. That's the nature of being a person, is that it feels like you have an infinite number of times to look at a tree, but in fact, it's extremely finite. And, she was like, what do I have left? Maybe 12,000 times to stare at a tree? Like, that feels totally insufficient, Once you put a number on it, you realize, like, oh, this is all quite fleeting.
In Everything Is Tuberculosis, we can put the book right there. It's
nice.
A book that you've written and I read, and it's absolutely fantastic. And aside from getting into all the nitty-gritty of the statistics, you raised a point that I'd never thought about, which is that we don't tend to view the history of the world in terms of disease. We view it through war and commerce and all the dynastic mixing, but those are all instances where humans are acting, not being acted upon.
Right.
Do you think we're uncomfortable with that idea of being powerless to a natural force?
It's uncomfortable for us to acknowledge, for instance, that Alexander the Great died of malaria or typhoid, which is why rumors have always circulated that he died of poisoning. Because, like, how could the greatest emperor in the world just, like, be killed by typhoid?
It's so anticlimactic.
It's so
The
anticlimactic.
movie version of that sucks.
Exactly. But usually we don't see stories about disease that center illness, and I think part of that is because it challenges our notion that we are the captains of our fate, that we are the people steering the ship of our story. But in truth, like, disease is a super important fact of human history. 93% of people die of disease on one level or another. And so how can we not incorporate this into our stories about ourselves and our world?
1.3 million people this year will die of tuberculosis. But when you asked a doctor, I believe his name was KJ Sung, how many people would die of tuberculosis if they had access to healthcare like me? And he said 0.
None.
Which kind of makes you realize that the cause isn't bacteria or the natural world. The cause is us. We're making the active decision to allow over 1 million people to die. It seems like a very stark indictment against humanity.
It is, although we used to make the choice to let over 2 million people a year die. Tuberculosis has been curable since the 1950s, and so at least since the 1980s, there is no reason to live in a world with tuberculosis, and yet we have, and we still do. And so it is a stark indictment of humanity. We have built systems that simply do not value all human lives in the same way, and that is a real failure on our part. On the other hand, we have made real progress when it comes to fighting tuberculosis and other diseases of injustice like HIV and malaria, and that progress is not natural, it's not inevitable, and it's quite fragile. I think, unfortunately, we're going to see how fragile it is in the coming years as we walk back from funding healthcare globally, both in the US and in other countries. We're going to see some of the consequences of that in our experience of disease. We're going to see it much more common. Already, hundreds of thousands of people have seen their treatment interrupted just in the last few months for tuberculosis, and that's catastrophic. And so it's I have to hold these things in my mind at the same time, that we are monstrous, especially when we make ourselves distant from suffering. You know, like we are capable of such horrible horror to each other. And that at the same time that we are incredibly generous and compassionate. Like humans are both and not either or. For a long time I tried to settle in my mind, are humans good, are humans bad, are humans good news, are humans bad news? And what I've eventually come to is yes, all of that and more.
John, for the second course of your final meal, we have the smoked salmon sushi platter. Now we have smoked salmon sashimi here. We actually sliced this and smoked it fresh in-house, finished with a little bit of smoked Arbequina olive oil. And then we have a lightly blowtorched smoked salmon nigiri, and then a smoked salmon maki roll, just a little bit of avocado.
Wow. I'm so excited.
I am too. This is one of the more unique requests. We have a lot of people have wanted sushi, but never specifically smoked salmon sushi.
Well, so when I was 22, I never had sushi until I was 22 years old. I was living in Chicago, and I had smoked salmon sushi because I was scared to eat raw fish.
Yeah.
I figured if it was a little smoked, that would be fine. And I remember the first time I ate this, like a smoked salmon maki roll, I put it in my mouth and I was like, how has the world been gatekeeping this incredible food from me for these many, many years? That takes me right back to being 22.
How would you characterize the differences in the way that you perceived happiness from when you were 22 to now? Because most people when they're 22, they're likely struggling more financially. But also, I at least tend to look back in those years and go, God, that was so much fun.
Well, I'm glad it was fun for you. I had some fun moments.
Yeah.
I loved my roommates. I loved my time in Chicago. I was not overall having fun. I remember I went to the doctor once when I was maybe 24. I had this wonderful Polish doctor in Chicago, and she left the room with my chart still there. And the first thing I saw was, patient is a low-functioning young adult.
Dragged his ass. Oh my God.
I mean, she didn't think I was going to look at the chart. It's not her fault that I was a low-functioning young adult. But that was the situation.
Yeah.
Even my doctor knew that I was a low-functioning young adult.
I've met this man for 38 total minutes.
Yeah, and I know everything I need to know about him. I really, really struggled in my 20s. I struggled to find myself. I struggled to find meaning. I struggled in relationships, especially.
God, that's so good. It's not overly salted too, because we wanted to let the salmon actually shine and breathe a little bit, but still get that smoke.
I'm gonna try the sashimi now. Oh man, oh my God. Y'all should go pro in this. You should open a restaurant.
Do you want to invest? We could just franchise a Long John Silver's instead.
I'm in. No, I don't want to do a Long John Silver's. I want to do this.
Okay. John, I don't know if you know this, but everything is tuberculosis. Can I name a couple things and you tell me how they are related to tuberculosis?
With pleasure.
Post-punk revival band Franz Ferdinand.
Franz Ferdinand is named for an actual archduke, the Archduke Franz Ferdinand, who died, tragically, causing World War I, or at least was sort of the person who set off World War I. The three people who were most directly responsible for assassinating Archduke Franz Ferdinand, including the guy who threw a bomb that missed him and the guy later who successfully shot him, were all dying of tuberculosis. And they knew they were dying of tuberculosis. And that is part of the reason why they wanted to die for a great cause rather than just dying of a disease. And this is part of the reason of what motivated them to be the assassins of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, thereby setting off World War I, but arguably more importantly, giving the band Franz Ferdinand its name.
UCLA football.
UCLA in particular.
Do you know where UCLA plays their home games?
No.
It's a stadium called the Rose Bowl.
The Rose Bowl? Are you going to connect it to tuberculosis for me?
I was trying to gently lead the horse. The Rose Bowl is in a city called Pasadena, California.
Pasadena, California, it was founded as a tuberculosis colony. There were many of these cities around the U.S. that were essentially TB colonies where people with TB would go to recover, and there would be sanatoria that were set up, these big institutions that one scholar said were too hospital-like to be a prison and too prison-like to be a hospital.
It's not a middle ground you want to be in.
No. It's not it wasn't a fun place to be a patient, for sure. And these sanatoria were places where people ostensibly could recover from tuberculosis with clean air and lots of rest and whatnot. And Pasadena, California was known as the land of new lungs because people would go out there to try to heal their lungs.
Finally, Taylor Swift.
She's got that song. You know the one.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Take me to the lakes where all the poets went to die. The lakes in question are in the Lake District, where all the poets went to die. Like the 19th century British poets who had tuberculosis would go to the Lake District to recover. And what they were dying of course, was TB, was almost always consumption. So Byron said that he would like to die of consumption. This was when the disease was heavily romanticized. He said he would like to die of consumption, so all the ladies would say, look at that Byron, how interesting he looks in dying.
Oh, man. Talk to me about like the profound experience of meeting a young TB patient named Henry in the book, because you do paint him as this full human, which of course he is, whereas in other lenses he might be considered a statistic.
So in 2019, when I didn't even know that tuberculosis was still a thing, I visited a TB hospital in Sierra Leone with some doctors I was traveling with. And while we were there, I was literally grabbed by the shirt by this kid whose name was Henry, which is also my son's name, and took me all around the hospital, showed me the kitchen and the laboratory and the wards and everything. And then eventually we made our way back to the doctors, and I was like, whose kid is that? Is that one of y'all's kids? And they said, no, he's a patient, and he's one of the patients we're really concerned about, because even though Henry was responding to the antibiotics, so he was up and about and able to walk and all that stuff, they could tell that the infection was going to come roaring back because he wasn't responding well enough to the antibiotics. It was really following Henry's story over the next 4 years, his journey to try to recover from multi-drug-resistant tuberculosis, that I realized I wanted to write a book. And that's exactly what I wanted to do. I wanted to write about Henry in a way that didn't essentialize him, hopefully, that found ways to humanize him so that people could understand that his life was just as important as anyone else's life. And yet, over and over again, Henry was told, I'm sorry, but it's just not cost effective to treat your tuberculosis. If we have the technology, if we have the ability to cure someone, I mean, it costs 150 times less to cure Henry's tuberculosis than it cost to cure my brother's cancer. And yet still, he was told over and over again, there's no money to do this. There's no money to cure you.
There's so many beautiful stories in the book about people just refusing to give up, people refusing to believe that someone will go from life to statistic. And there's a doctor named Dr. Jerome who, there's all of the big societal forces of not having roads and infrastructure and aid. And then there's also just a snapshot of a man threatening to beat him up if he treats his son for tuberculosis.
Yeah,
and him just saying, beat me later. Beat me later. Let me do this. Beat me later.
Yeah, so Dr. Jerome was told by Henry's father, I mean, Henry was essentially on his deathbed. And Dr. Jerome had worked really, really hard with the Ministry of Health and lots of other folks to get the drugs that Henry needed to survive. And those drugs were coming. But Henry's father was so frustrated and Henry was so sick, and his father felt like, my son is going to die in this hospital instead of dying at home. And I want him to die. If he's going to die, I want him to die at home, you know, with his family. And he did. He threatened to beat up the doctor. And Dr. Jerome said, beat me up if this doesn't work, which takes a lot of courage. Yeah. And in the end, I think that's pretty much what saved Henry's life.
John, for course number 3 of your final meal, we have the red onion and red pepper pizza. This is a 2-day fermented pizza dough that we hand tossed, and then a little bit of fire roasted red bell pepper, some red onion, tossed it in the uni pizza oven to get nice and charred on the bottom. And then we have the homemade soft pretzels. So we did boil this in a heavily caustic lye solution, as one does with the pretzel, and then bake them off fresh with a little bit of pretzel salt on top. We have a homemade cheese sauce and a honey mustard dipping sauce.
So I picked this because when I was a kid, my mom, who was a community activist in Orlando, Florida, she won this award. That meant we had free passes to Disney for a year. And my parents kind of treated it as childcare. They would, during the summer, they would drop us off at like 8 a.m. and then go to work and then pick us up at the end of the day. I ate so many soft pretzels that summer. And this is my... Dare I say these are better than the Walt Disney World soft pretzels.
I kind of love that childcare strategy, though. It's like, listen, it's getting expensive. We have stuff to do. Goofy, you take them.
Yeah. I was also like a 9th grader, and I wore a trench coat every day.
Okay, that adds up.
Hey, who's laughing? I wore a trench coat every day. It was my look, even though it was like blazing hot Orlando, Florida sunshine. Absolute misery inside that trench coat, but you know, it was my armor, man. It was like the thing that I held in the world to protect me from the world.
You've said about yourself, these are not my words, that you were, quote, a real tough asshole to deal with growing up. But you had a lot of adults in your life that didn't give up on you. Who were those adults?
First and foremost, my parents. I mean, I was a bad student. I was a troubled kid, as the saying goes, and so I smoked cigarettes. I remember once I was smoking a cigarette on my back porch, my parents' back porch. I was like 15 years old. My mom came outside and she was like, "Obviously, you cannot smoke in the house." And I was like, "What are you gonna do?"
Jesus.
I want to punch that kid. I want to give him a right hook. Yeah, so that's the kind of kid I was. Really difficult, actively difficult. And I think I was that way partly because I was very self-destructive. I had some untreated mental health conditions. There were various reasons maybe why I was like that. I was able to be like that and still get to be okay and still find my way through because I had all these adults who didn't give up on me. My parents, first and foremost, also my teachers. I went to a boarding school in Alabama for the last couple of years of high school, and I had extraordinary teachers there who just, I gave no indication to them that I had any promise whatsoever, and they just assumed that I did. They just believed in me as a writer, as a person, and I always feel like I need to say their names, like even though they probably aren't going to watch this, like Mr. McAdam and Ms. Lehman, who just believed in me as a person and thought that I could be a good student. And then my senior year, I kind of became a bit of a good student.
It's interesting. When I was in school, I learned very quickly that I was never going to be in the STEM fields. I just didn't have that kind of brain. But it sort of clicked in me that my point in learning is to find my place in the world, in a sense. And I took a tremendous amount of meaning from books. I remember reading like Don DeLillo's White Noise when I was 18, and that just absolutely floored me and influences how I feel. Vonnegut's Sirens of Titan, big books like that. But even learning about the pretzel, for instance. The 3 holes in a pretzel, we only have 2, but there's supposed to be a little hole right there, but the cloaca is sort of closed up. But pretzels were invented in the 7th century by a northern Italian monk, meant to mimic the arms of a child praying. And the 3 holes are said to suggest the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Oh.
Even the etymology of pretiola means little treat, and they would give pretzels to children as a treat for finishing their prayers. Obviously, now the Rolled Gold Corporation does not ascribe to that, Catholic theology, I would bet.
Sure.
But it's these stories that we tell ourselves that root us in the world, and I think make you care a little bit. And I think religion's very good at doing that. I know you're a man of faith. How has your religion, or at least your faith, influence your faith in humanity?
Well, my brother, who is an atheist, and I often talk about it as hearing a voice, like you're inside a house and you hear a voice that says, "Leave the house is on fire." And Hank and I disagree about where the voice comes from.
Sure.
Hank thinks the voice comes from inside the house. I think the voice comes from on high. But we agree about what the voice is saying.
Yeah.
Which is the really important thing. And so to me, in my faith tradition, I feel that my faith tradition calls me to be in the world and of the world, and to try to focus on justice and people who are and injustice and inequity, and that's what I'm called to do very clearly. I do not spend a lot of time thinking about whether God is really real, or spending time thinking about whether there is an afterlife or any of that. Those aren't the questions that are central to me. The questions that are central to me are if God existed, or if God exists, what would or what does God want from me in the world?
It's interesting that you and Hank ended up in such similar places, coming at it from such different angles, because I was going to ask if there is some sort of secular way to find yourself in the same position, but obviously Hank found that.
The benefit of a faith community for me is partly the community. It's a third space. It's this place that isn't work or home, and where there's also community. I think that secular spaces need to do a better job of being that third space, whether that's the library or an independent bookstore, or those are just the ones that I'm inclined toward as a book person. It occurs
bowling alleys and gyms.
Bowling alleys and gyms. Those are yours. Yeah. I love a bowling alley. You can also get a soft pretzel at a bowling alley.
You sure can. They also have pizza, John. Dig into the pizza.
There we go. Let's get some pizza.
It's perfect pizza tent. Perfect pizza tent. Perfect segue.
Nice work there.
Thank you. It always comes back around. Oh. You also said something in the book where if you tell people who say they're hurting that they're not hurting, that's not very helpful. And I feel like that's where we kind of are with humanity right now, where we can look around and say we have all of these comforts, and people say, yeah, but it feels bad. Saying it doesn't feel bad isn't exactly helpful. What do you think is?
Well, I think you're right that you have to say your pain is real. And when people hear that their pain isn't real, they immediately disbelieve you because they know that their pain is real. It's the realest thing in the world. Saying like, no, but like the world is so much better because fewer children are dying. That's true. And the world is so much better because more people are literate. That's true. The world is so much better because more girls have access to education. That's true. And yet the profound injustice is still real. And in certain ways, the world is getting worse. Like people aren't wrong that the world is getting worse. Yeah. And when they feel like their lives are less valued than life used to be, that's a real feeling, and we have to acknowledge the reality of that. I don't know how you pull someone out of that darkness. I don't know how to pull myself out of it, to be honest with you. So I don't feel like I can say how to pull someone out of it, except to begin with solidarity, begin with, I will walk this path with you instead of telling you why you shouldn't be feeling what you're feeling.
Yeah, you've said before that hope for you is not merely an intellectual exercise, but rather a means and necessity for survival.
Yeah.
Why is that?
I struggle with despair. I struggle with feelings of hopelessness. I struggle with the feeling that my life doesn't mean anything and there's no reason for me to be here and that I'm not helping anyone or anything and that, I'm a burden on my family, all that stuff, all those lies that despair tells you, which are so powerful because despair has such a profound explanatory power. It makes everything make sense. Like the problem with despair is that it's lying. We all know that on some level, right? Like we all know that simple of an explanation for everything can't possibly be true. It's way overly simplistic. It's way unfair. And so there has to be more to it than that. There has to be cause for hope because I know intellectually that simple story is just way too straightforward to actually be true.
Yeah. John, you know what I think would cheer you up? If I gave you this copy of the Everything is Tuberculosis AI Slop written cookbook inspired by John Green because the future is great and AI is going to save us all.
Oh my God.
There's one for a breathe easy green smoothie.
Inspired by John Green, recipes to fight chronic inflammation and nourish the body. Ugh.
And if you look on the front, it says 5 bonuses.
Tuberculosis then and now. Oh, this is actually written by AI.
Yes, because we live in that world now and everything seems kind of bad and dumb. Aside from the existential threats of climate change and nuclear winters, we have Everything is Tuberculosis cookbook.
Wow.
Sorry,
I'm reading.
Did that make you feel better?
No, this makes me feel much worse. I mean, it makes me feel kind of good that I guess my book is selling well enough to inspire an AI slop cookbook.
Meal plan.
Oh, it has 5 bonuses.
You haven't looked at the Can I show you the bonuses?
Bonuses is.
There's 5 of them.
Yeah, tell me the 5
Most
bonuses.
cookbooks don't even have one.
Yeah, I mean, it's
so
frankly.
Bonuses, color to make it real.
Oh, you color the tomato to make it real.
That's only one of the bonuses. This counts as one. You get 2 tomatoes, but it's 1 bonus.
Oh, so it's kind of double the bonus.
Chicken.
Oh, it's a coloring book at the end.
Well, no, 5 bonuses.
Yeah. It's chicken and salad. It's chicken salad.
Try and make out what the AI vegetables are in there. You can't. Some of them look like beach mushrooms.
Oh, yeah. I think this is a potato and this is a strawberry, which is a very bad decision. Like, I'm not an expert in this stuff, but potatoes and strawberries do not make a good fruit salad.
According to AI, they might.
There's an apple and an avocado. I mean, these 5 bonuses, they are miraculous.
Aren't they?
Wow.
Oh, God.
Oh, that's it. Yeah, all right.
Yeah, that's dead. We're all doomed. We're all doomed. Jesus Christ.
Even though it's written by AI, it still has really bad grammar. So, like, it wasn't written by a great AI. Like, I don't think they paid extra for the fancy versions of the AI. So there's no commas here. It's just one sentence. Tuberculosis, once known as consumption, has haunted human history for thousands of years. Ancient Egyptian mummies showed signs of spinal TB, and in the 18th and 19th centuries, the disease surged across Europe and North America, leaving a trail of suffering and romanticized tragedy.
John, for the final course of your final meal, the oatmeal raisin cookies. Now these are fresh baked in-house, a little bit of brown butter, brown sugar, mashed together with oats, flour, and the finest raisins the supermarket had that day. And then we have the key lime pie. This is actually from fat and flour. We would make it ourselves, but Nicole Rucker makes a much better pie than we ever could. This is our favorite key lime pie in the city. Please enjoy.
Amazing. I'm so excited. Key lime pie especially reminds me of my childhood. I grew up in Florida, where key lime pie is sort of the state dish insofar as Florida has an identity. And I fancied myself a key lime pie expert when I was a young child. Like when I was 8 or 9, I would always order the key lime pie and then give my parents a review on a 5-star scale, which is kind of the beginning of the Anthropocene Reviewed.
What are the core tenets you look for in a perfect key lime pie?
It's got to be so tart, but then this part, what is this part called?
Cream?
Yeah, cream, if you will. That part has to be like it is, really, really like dense and delicious. Sorry, the graham cracker crust. I'm gonna get a little bit of crust for myself. You know, I'm a fan of the show, and I kind of always thought that they don't actually eat because there's so much food.
There's a lot of food.
And so I always thought that like people come on here and like they take a couple bites and then like somebody comes in and like takes part of the food away, you know? But actually you eat it because it's so good. Nothing is faked on this show. I can tell you, I've wondered this for years, but as a guest, I can tell you nothing is faked. The prep is real. The quality of the questions is real. It's astonishing to me. All right, let's go back to talking about, I just wanted to tell the people something that I've been thinking about.
I'm so glad we deep faked that video of John Green saying our show was good. I was going to ask
You'll never know.
I was going to ask if you ever feel it's a burden that people ask you about the largest, most existential questions on the planet. I listened to an interview where the interviewer just asked you, will the human race survive? And I was like, tell me the good news, John. Like, do you ever just want to talk about Wimbledon?
I do love my football team. I love fourth tier English football, and I love talking about fourth tier English football. And if you want to have me back for a second meal, we can do nothing but talk about fourth tier English football, and I can bring all the meat pies in that you eat in England and all that stuff. But I don't really feel like it's a burden, to be honest with you. It's a privilege. To be able to talk about the stuff that really interests me and to do so in an earnest way. Like, I really try hard to be earnest. And so it is really a privilege when people want to hear me talk about that stuff or when people ask me about that stuff, because it means that they're on that journey with me and they're willing to also bring their earnest, deepest selves to that conversation, which I always think is a real privilege.
I'll give you a softball then.
Great.
What's the meaning of life?
I think we are here for each other. And I think we are here to walk with each other through what we will walk with each other through. I think cooperation and collaboration are the human superpowers, and that's what we're here to do. We're here to be unalone in the world, unalone in our feelings, unalone in our experiences. And that's not to say that we're never alone. Like, I'm a very introverted person. I spend 12 or 14 hours by myself every day, very happily. I would never want to interrupt that alone time. But I think in the deepest way, we're here to be unalone. Like, we're here to live in community and be here for each other and with each other. And I think that's it.
What's one trick you've taken into the bedroom that you learned from giraffes?
Oh, that's a good one. They hit each other in the peeing parts. The male hits the female in her bladder, causing her to pee, and then he drinks the pee to taste whether or not she's ready for whether or not she's ovulating. So that's one we didn't take. Yeah, that's the big one we didn't take.
So you're doing...
We just kind of did the opposite of that. We were like,
whatever they're doing.
We're doing the opposite. We don't. Yeah, I mean, yeah. Great. Thanks for the question.
No problem. No problem. Now's the point where the succession of questions get really weird, because we're just going straight from that to how did your experience being a student chaplain?
Wow.
And I know there's no good continuity. There's no way you start getting the sugars at the end of it.
Yeah, that's a hard transition. How did my experience being a student chaplain do what?
Affect your perspective on life? You said it was such a devastating, overwhelming experience. Would you have changed that if you could go back?
No. I'm grateful for that experience. I wish I'd been a better chaplain. I wish I could have been a better chaplain to the people, who were going through the worst days of their lives. And I think it made me believe that we shouldn't have to go through anything alone. That's the most important thing. You shouldn't have to be alone in that. It's isolating enough. It's lonely enough without us making it worse as a social order by somehow treating people who've experienced loss as different or lesser or other. So I think that's one of the lessons I took from it. But yeah, it was a hard time.
Yeah. I know you said it's not a particularly interesting question to you, but it's always an interesting question to me, mostly seeing how people answer it. But what do you think happens when you die?
I don't happen to be inclined toward thinking about the afterlife one way or the other. Like I just don't spend a lot of time thinking about it. When I do think about it, I think that love is stronger than death, and I believe that. You know, I realized this when my son was born. I remember looking down at my son when he was first born, and realizing that as long as either of us is alive, I will be his father and he will be my son. And that's true for the people in my life who are gone now. They're still my friend. That friendship is real. That love is real. It's just not shared anymore. And that's all I can say. That's all I know for sure.
You ready to get in the lightning round?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Who's the one person, dead or alive, you'd want to share your actual last meal with?
Who is one person, dead or alive? Can I tell you the truth?
Yes, I would love
It's
that.
so cheesy, but it's
Finally.
my wife.
Oh, man, I thought it was going to be something way cooler. What song do you want to be played at your funeral?
This Year by the Mountain Goats. I'm going to make it through this year if it kills me, which it did.
What's one life lesson you think everyone can take? Oh, no, this is the giraffe sex question again.
Do it. Do it.
No, I just...
Ask it again.
I said what's...
Do it again.
You know what the reason the transition was so bad is because the giraffe sex thing was just supposed to be in the lightning round.
Yeah.
And somehow I
But
was
it's just,
like...
you got it into your head.
Correct.
You were passionate about it. And
But I
it gave
also
me
had-
a chance to talk about giraffe sex, which
Yeah,
is
it
one of
really
my
did.
areas
Well,
of interest.
And now we're here. What's one life lesson you think everyone can take away from the sex lives of giraffes?
Once again, just because a giraffe does it, doesn't mean you have to.
Actually, a good life lesson. Which was more nerve-wracking, being tracked down by a spy for your criticism of the Russian government or driving the pace car for the Indy Grand Prix?
They were both pretty scary and definitely two weird experiences. But driving the pace car for the Indy Grand Prix was scarier because the guy who had the pole position kept bumping up against the car. Like he would come within an inch of the car and he was radioing saying, "This guy's going too slow." And I was like, "Simon Pagino, I am going as fast as I safely can." It was very scary. It was very stressful.
Who's your dream eulogizer at your funeral?
Oh, Ophelia Dahl, the co-founder of Partners in Health and the daughter of Roald Dahl.
Why do you care so much about the liminal space between left thigh and buttock?
Oh, that's where my logo is on my favorite soccer team's uniform. I occupy the back of the shorts, the liminal space between left thigh and buttock. It says DFTBA on it. Show it. Show it right now. Look at that.
It's incredible. If you could haunt anyone after you die, who would you haunt?
Oh, there's so many people I would love to haunt. Gosh, who would I like to haunt? I think it'd be kind of fun. I don't want to keep saying Sarah, but I think it'd be very fun to haunt Sarah. I saw the movie Ghost. I'm going to pick my spouse.
What's your biggest fear?
Oh, this reminds me of something that happened once. I'm sorry to not answer your lightning round question with a lightning round, but this is an incredible story. So I was dating this girl, and she said, "What's your biggest fear?" And I said, abandonment, which is true. My biggest fear is abandonment, being alone in the world, etc., and being left by people I love, and all that stuff. And I went on for a bit, and then I said, "What's your biggest fear?" And she said, "Geese." And I was like, "Oh no, I fundamentally misunderstood the question."
And then she abandoned you, and you bought
And
her
she
a pet
did.
goose.
She did. She totally abandoned me. I mean, after somebody goes on about abandonment, that's a lot of pressure for somebody.
Yep.
That's a lot to hold. Oh man. Oh, 23-year-old me,
We'll
low
just-
functioning young adult.
We'll write down spiders just so you don't make that mistake again. What's your greatest regret in life?
Oh, I have so many regrets. I think it's underrated. I think having regrets is totally underrated. I regret eating a sandwich that was intended for the New York Knicks in the New York Knicks locker room. It was intended for the players, and I started making myself a sandwich. And I ate the sandwich, and the head of player operations said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm eating a sandwich." And he said, "Who are you?" And I said, "I'm John Green, the novelist." And he said, "Those sandwiches are for the players."
Oh, sorry, John Green, point guard.
Exactly. Maybe you recognize me from the New York Knicks. That's one of my biggest regrets. That's one I think about all the time.
Finally, John, are you happy?
I'm happy right now. I really am. I've just had my last meal. The food was incredible. It was so much better than I expected it to be in terms of quality. And also the conversation has been wonderful. But yeah, I am happy. I feel really, right now, and I need to remember this for when I don't feel it, but right now I feel incredibly grateful to be here with you.
I am incredibly grateful, one, for you being here and enjoying this meal with me, but two, just for existing. Truly, the world is absolutely a better place with people like you in it, and to a slightly lesser degree, Hank.
I couldn't agree more.
Finally, John, if you want to deliver your last words to that camera right there.
All right. I mean, this is so bad. My last words in real life, if I had last words, they're the worst last words. Don't make these your last words because they're so cliche, they're so obvious, everyone's gonna say it. But what I would actually say if I were actually dying and this was my actual last meal, I would turn to my family and I would say, I love you.
John, I think that's actually really good.
It's true.
I think it's good.
It's what I would say.
That's that's as much as you can hope for. You know?
It's all you want out of life, is to be able to love and be loved. And so that's what I would want to remind myself that I had that in my life.
Well, again, thank you so much. Everything's Tuberculosis out now wherever you get books. Support a local bookstore. Truly an incredible story, and I have now been inspired by the fashion of tuberculosis chic. I've started to pick my little dress hem from off the ground so it doesn't stir up the dust.
Very smart of you.
Applying belladonna to my eyes.
Very well. That is less smart.
Yeah. Well. Oh wait. Why? Is there something bad about it?
It's a little bit poisonous, but you'll be fine.
What are you gonna do? Anyways, you can find those stories and more in the book. Nothing makes death more palatable like a little drinky drink. The Last Meals bar set is available now at mythical.com.